There are moments that seem ordinary on the surface, and then there are moments that carry a weight your mind cannot immediately explain. This is one of those moments. Before you continue listening, allow yourself to become fully present with what is unfolding right now, because something deeper than coincidence has brought you here. Out of countless distractions, countless directions your attention could have traveled, you arrived at these words that matters more than you realize. Somewhere beyond logic, beyond the part of you that constantly searches for evidence and certainty, there has been a subtle pull guiding you toward this exact encounter. You may have felt it as an unexpected curiosity, a persistent inner tug, or a quiet sensation that refused to be ignored. Whatever form it took, it carried you here for a reason. There are forces operating beneath the visible surface of life, currents moving long before the conscious mind becomes aware of them. And whether you have fully recognized it or not, those currents have been influencing your journey for far longer than you know. Deep inside, something has been attempting to capture your attention. It has spoken through intuition, through strange moments of recognition, through feelings that appeared without explanation. It has whispered through circumstances, experiences, and encounters that seemed disconnected at the time. Yet now, standing where you are today, you can begin to sense how those pieces may have been leading toward a larger realization. Chosen one, understand this. The message reaching you now is not an isolated event. It is part of a conversation that has been unfolding throughout your entire life. Every experience, every challenge, every unexpected turn has carried a signal embedded within it. The universe has not been speaking through a single moment. It has been communicating through the entirety of your path. And if something within you is already responding to these words, if there is a feeling stirring beneath the surface that tells you this resonates on a deeper level, then recognize that reaction. Because what is occurring here extends beyond simple information. What you are encountering is an awakening of awareness. Once certain truths are recognized, they cannot be unseen. Once a deeper understanding settles into your spirit, the version of yourself that existed before that realization can never fully return. Life contains many days that blend together, days that leave little imprint upon the soul. Yet scattered among them are rare intersections, moments that seem to exist outside the ordinary flow of time. June 24th stands as one of those intersections. It represents a threshold, a crossing point where unseen movements begin rearranging the energy surrounding your life. It is a period when dormant possibilities begin stirring, when invisible shifts start preparing the ground for visible transformation. Even if your conscious mind cannot yet comprehend the full scope of what is taking place, something within you already senses it. In many ways, your journey has been quietly moving toward this moment for far longer than you realize. The disappointments that left you frustrated, the pauses that tested your patience, the opportunities that appeared only to vanish before your eyes, none of them occurred without purpose. What looked like obstacles may have been part of a much larger design, positioning you precisely where you needed to be. And now you find yourself standing at the edge of something significant. That unexplained restlessness you have been carrying recently, that subtle anticipation that follows you even during quiet moments, that feeling that change is hovering just beyond the horizon, these are not random emotional fluctuations, they are signals. They are indications that something within your life is beginning to shift. What you may have mistaken for anxiety could actually be preparation. What felt like uncertainty may be the sensation of old energies loosening their grip as new ones begin to emerge. The universe does not orchestrate meaningful turning points carelessly. When a threshold appears, it appears with intention, and when such a moment arrives, it often marks the beginning of developments that cannot be reversed once they begin. Long before confusion entered your life, before periods of isolation challenged your confidence, before questions about your purpose became impossible to ignore, there was already something distinct about you. You have sensed it throughout your life, even during periods when you tried to dismiss it. There has always been an element of your experience that felt different from those around you. Perhaps it revealed itself through heightened sensitivity, through the ability to perceive emotional undercurrents others overlooked, or through a depth of awareness that often left you feeling out of place. People may have recognized it without understanding it. You may have attempted to suppress it in order to fit comfortably into environments that felt safer and more familiar. Yet no matter how hard you tried, something continued setting you apart. You noticed what others missed. You felt things more deeply than seemed reasonable. You carried emotional and spiritual burdens that often appeared larger than the circumstances themselves. There were times when you questioned whether this difference was a flaw. You wondered whether you were too intense, too sensitive, too unusual for the world around you. Yet what you interpreted as weakness was never weakness at all. It was preparation. Because those called toward greater awareness rarely begin with understanding. The assignment arrives first. Recognition comes later. Long before you possessed the language to describe your purpose, you are already walking within it. For what feels like an eternity, you have watched opportunities slip away. You have witnessed doors close just as your hand reached toward them. You have carried the frustration of waiting while others appeared to move forward effortlessly. More than once you asked why your path seemed heavier, slower, and more complicated than the journeys unfolding around you. Yet hidden beneath those questions was a truth that only becomes visible in hindsight. What looked like delay was often alignment. What appeared to be denial was often preparation. The things destined for you were not being withheld. You were being refined. You were being shaped into the version of yourself capable of receiving what is now approaching. Had certain opportunities arrived earlier, they might have exceeded the capacity of the person you were at that time. The growth required to hold what is coming had not yet been completed, and so life continued sculpting you through experience, pressure, patience, and transformation. There were also periods when everything became silent. The signs seemed to vanish. Direction disappeared. The connection you trusted felt distant and unreachable. During those seasons, doubt became loud. Questions multiplied. You wondered whether you had misunderstood everything, whether your sense of purpose had been an illusion, whether you had imagined the calling you once believed was guiding you. Yet silence has its own purpose. Silence is not absence. Silence is often the environment where the deepest transformation occurs. When external reassurance disappears and familiar signs fade away, something profound begins developing within. Trust becomes stronger, faith becomes deeper, inner knowing becomes more reliable than external proof. You were never being abandoned. You were learning how to stand firmly even when certainty could not be seen. Every experience carried meaning. The heartbreaks, the betrayals, the confusion, the nights when loneliness seemed to surround you from every direction. None of it was meaningless suffering. Each challenge carried lessons hidden beneath its surface. Each wound revealed something that comfort never could. Difficulty awakened parts of you that would have otherwise remained asleep. Pressure uncovered strengths you did not know existed. And through every trial, you were becoming capable of recognizing what is now moving toward your life. Because something is changing. You have already begun to feel its presence. Even if the words to explain it have not fully arrived yet, the shift has already begun, and what comes next will make everything you have endured easier to understand. Something important is happening beneath the surface of your life, and even if your eyes cannot yet trace every detail, your spirit already recognizes that the atmosphere around you is no longer what it once was. There is a subtle but undeniable difference in the energy you have been moving through recently. The old patterns that seemed determined to repeat themselves over and over again are beginning to lose their grip. Situations that once felt permanent no longer carry the same power. Emotional loops that kept pulling you back into familiar struggles are starting to unravel. At first, the change may seem small, almost invisible, like the first crack appearing in a wall that has stood for years. But make no mistake, what is happening is significant. The cycles that once confined you are weakening, and for the first time in what feels like forever, movement has returned. There is a current building beneath your reality, a quiet momentum that tells you something is finally shifting. This is not wishful thinking. It is not a fantasy created by exhaustion or desire. It is the beginning of a transition, a turning point that cannot be undone once it fully takes hold. Because when alignment starts moving through your life, it changes everything it touches. The version of reality built around old limitations can no longer remain intact. And that is exactly where you are now. The message becoming clear is no longer subtle. It is no longer hidden behind signs or symbols that require interpretation. It arrives with unmistakable certainty. It cuts through hesitation. It dissolves confusion. It reaches directly into the places where doubt once lived and replaces uncertainty with clarity. The message is simple: the season of waiting is ending, not sometime later. Not after another round of preparation, not when every circumstance finally appears perfect. Now, the chapter that seemed to stretch endlessly is reaching its conclusion. What felt delayed was never abandoned. What felt dislected was never forgotten. The unseen arrangements taking place behind the scenes have reached completion. The pieces that needed to come together have come together. The timing that once seemed impossible has arrived, and the opening you have been seeking is preparing to reveal itself. Yet there is something essential you must understand before that happens. The opening itself is not the greatest change. The transformation it requires from you is. Many people imagine that receiving an opportunity automatically solves everything. They believe that once the door appears, life will instantly make sense. But what stands before you is much deeper than a simple opportunity or fortunate circumstance. What approaches carries the power to alter your relationship with yourself. It asks you to step beyond the identity you have known and into one that operates from a completely different level of awareness. You have likely imagined how this moment would unfold. You have created mental pictures of what success, breakthrough, or fulfillment might look like. You have rehearsed possible outcomes countless times. Yet reality rarely arrives wearing the costume expectation creates for it. What is meant for you was never designed to fit inside your previous understanding. It is larger than the picture you constructed, more transformative than the scenario you envisioned, more powerful than the outcome you thought you wanted. As the doorway begins to emerge, you may notice conflicting emotions rising within you. Excitement will be there, hope will be there, relief will be there, but resistance may appear as well. Not because you are unprepared, but because every major transformation requires the release of something familiar. One part of you is eager to move forward. Another part still feels attached to the known landscape of your past. This tension is natural. It happens whenever growth becomes real. Yet understand this. Once the next chapter begins, the old version of your life cannot remain untouched. The structures you relied upon, the assumptions you carried, the identity you built around past experiences will begin dissolving. And what replaces them will ask for your complete presence, your complete trust, and your willingness to stand fully inside the person you have become. Looking back, there were losses that felt impossible to understand. Certain departures shattered expectations. Certain endings left wounds that seemed unfair. People disappeared from your life without explanation. Paths you invested your heart into suddenly collapsed. Opportunities you believed were destined for you vanished without warning. In those moments, it was easy to interpret what happened as rejection or punishment. Yet a deeper perspective reveals something different. What left your life did so because it could not travel where you are now headed. The removal was not cruelty. It was preparation. The space being created was necessary, because what is approaching cannot exist comfortably alongside energies, relationships, and identities that no longer match your direction. Sometimes alignment arrives by addition, other times it arrives by subtraction. And often the things removed are making room for something far more connected to your future than your past. You have spent years carrying burdens that seemed disproportionate to your circumstances. There were emotions that felt too heavy for their apparent cause. Responsibilities arrived before you felt ready. Challenges demanded strength long before you understood where that strength would come from. More than once, you questioned why your path seemed more intense than the experiences unfolding around you, why everything felt deeper, more complicated, more emotionally demanding. What you could not fully see at the time was that you were engaged in work extending beyond the obvious surface of your life. You were confronting patterns that had existed for years. You were ending cycles that seemed determined to repeat themselves. You were moving through lessons designed not only to transform circumstances, but to transform consciousness itself. That process is never simple, it is never comfortable, and it is rarely understood while it is happening. Yet as this new phase begins unfolding, you may notice something remarkable. The weight you carried for so long is beginning to lift, not because you are becoming weaker, not because you are abandoning responsibility, but because your role is changing. The stage of endurance is giving way to the stage of expansion. Every difficult experience sharpens something within you. Confusion strengthened discernment. Disappointment refined wisdom. Chaos taught you how to recognize truth beneath appearances. You learned lessons that cannot be acquired through theory alone. You discovered when to remain silent and when to speak, when to continue investing energy and when to walk away, when to trust intuition and when to question illusion. Those insights were earned through experience. They came through mistakes, setbacks, and moments that forced you to see yourself more honestly. And now those lessons form part of the foundation supporting what comes next. Because the next chapter requires clarity. It requires confidence. It requires the ability to move forward without constantly looking backward. There is a version of yourself that cannot accompany you into the future now emerging. It is the version built around outdated fears, inherited limitations, and reactions formed during seasons you have already outgrown. Releasing that version may feel uncomfortable because familiarity often disguises itself as safety. Even when old habits create frustration, they can still feel comforting simply because they are known. Even identities that no longer serve us can feel difficult to abandon because they have become intertwined with our sense of self. Yet growth demands a complete release, not a temporary release, not a partial release, a complete one, because what is unfolding ahead requires room to exist, and every moment spent clinging to who you used to be delays your ability to fully embody who you are becoming. Meanwhile, changes are already occurring around you. Some will be obvious. Others will remain invisible until later. Certain people may begin behaving differently. Relationships may reveal truths that were previously hidden. Circumstances that once appeared stable may suddenly shift direction. Plans may change. Expectations may be challenged. What once felt predictable may become uncertain. But do not mistake this for chaos without meaning. This is the movement of alignment. When your internal energy changes, external reality begins reorganizing itself around that change. Everything connected to you must respond. Some things will rise alongside you, some things will naturally fall away. And while that process can feel unsettling, it is creating the conditions necessary for your next chapter to arrive. Because what is meant for you cannot fully enter a reality that is still arranged around a version of yourself you have already outgrown. And perhaps the greatest illusion remaining is the belief that this transformation still exists somewhere far ahead in the future. A part of you may still think there is more waiting to do, more preparation required, more distance between where you are and what is coming. Yet what you are beginning to discover is that the shift is not approaching, it has already begun. If there is one thing your mind continues to underestimate, it is how near you truly are to the change you have been sensing for so long. The distance between where you stand now and what is preparing to emerge is far smaller than your doubts would have you believe. In fact, the evidence is already surrounding you, though it may not appear in the dramatic ways you once expected. Small shifts have begun appearing beneath the surface of your everyday life. Certain emotions no longer carry the same weight they once did. Certain fears have started losing their authority. Certain situations that seemed permanently frozen are beginning to show signs of movement. These are not random developments. They are indications that the process you have been waiting for is already unfolding. The alignment is not something waiting somewhere in the future. It is already established. The foundation has already been laid. What remains now is your willingness to continue moving forward without demanding that every answer arrive before the next step is taken. This journey has never been designed to provide a complete map in advance. It operates differently. Here, trust opens the road ahead. Understanding arrives afterward. This is the space where many people hesitate because the mind wants guarantees before commitment. It wants certainty before movement. It wants proof before belief. Yet the path you are being invited onto asks something different from you. It asks you to trust what you feel before you can explain it. It asks you to honor what resonates before you can fully understand why. You are standing at the edge of a significant transition, in the final stretch before a breakthrough that has been building through countless experiences, lessons, and transformations. The invitation being extended to you now is not to work harder, struggle more intensely, or search endlessly for something outside yourself. The invitation is much simpler, yet far more challenging. It is to become still enough to recognize that what you have been calling in is already moving toward you. So much of your life has been spent proving, striving, pushing, and attempting to earn what you hoped would eventually arrive. But this next chapter is asking something entirely different. You are not being asked to demonstrate your worth. You are not being asked to convince the universe that you deserve what is meant for you. You are being asked to receive, and receiving requires a form of courage that many people never develop. It requires openness. It requires trust. It requires the willingness to believe that blessings can arrive without struggle attached to them. What is approaching cannot be captured through force. It cannot be chased down through exhaustion. It cannot be controlled into existence. It is something you step into, something you welcome, something you allow to unfold according to a timing greater than your own expectations. Somewhere along your journey, perhaps without even realizing it, an important transformation already began. There was a moment when the endless pursuit started losing its appeal. A moment when something deep within you became exhausted by the constant need to force outcomes. Not because you stopped caring, not because you stopped caring, not because you surrendered your dreams, but because a deeper wisdom started emerging within you. You began recognizing that what genuinely belongs in your life should not require endless struggle to remain there. You grew weary of fighting battles that never seemed to end, weary of pushing against doors that refused to open, weary of trying to control timelines that consistently ignored your demands. Again and again you invested energy into possibilities that never fully aligned, hoping persistence alone could transform misalignment into destiny. Eventually, something inside you softened, and that softening became one of the most important moments of your evolution, because within that surrender, you shifted from control into trust, from urgency into patience, from resistance into cooperation with a greater flow. What happened was not defeat, it was growth. It was the beginning of genuine readiness, because what is now approaching your life cannot be pursued through force. It arrives through receptivity. The energy connected to this next blessing feels fundamentally different from anything that came before it. When it enters your life, you will recognize the difference immediately, not merely through thought, but through an unmistakable feeling that settles deep within your spirit. Your body will sense it. Your intuition will recognize it. The quiet wisdom within you that has guided you through every previous challenge will know it before logic catches up. Unlike past situations that left you questioning every detail, this experience will carry a sense of naturalness. It will not feel complicated. It will not feel confusing. It will not demand endless analysis. Instead, it will feel strangely familiar, as though it has always been waiting for you and simply needed the right moment for the meeting to occur. And perhaps that is exactly what has been happening all along. Every challenge, every lesson, every delay has been directing you toward an experience that does not require you to wonder whether it belongs in your life. You have spent years learning how to survive, years learning how to endure pressure, disappointment, uncertainty, and hardship. Strength became your language because circumstances demanded it. Resilience became your identity because there seemed to be no alternative. Yet now a different lesson is emerging. The challenge before you is no longer about endurance. It is about acceptance. It is about allowing yourself to receive what is being offered. Surprisingly, this can feel more uncomfortable than struggle, because receiving requires vulnerability. It requires openness to possibility. It requires you to believe that something good could arrive and remain. Part of you may hesitate. Part of you may question whether it is truly yours. Part of you may prepare for loss before the blessing has even arrived. Those reactions are understandable. They were shaped by previous experiences. Yet this is precisely where your next level of growth exists. Not in how much suffering you can withstand, but in how completely you can welcome what belongs to you without shrinking away from it. Meanwhile, another transformation has been taking place quietly within you. A voice has been growing stronger. It does not speak through fear. It does not speak through anxiety. It emerges from a deeper place, a place connected to truth rather than insecurity. Recently, that inner guidance has become increasingly difficult to ignore. It nudges you towards certain decisions. It alerts you when something feels misaligned. It creates peace around some directions and discomfort around others. This is not imagination. It is not coincidence. It is clarity returning after a prolonged season of uncertainty. The guidance you have been seeking externally has been strengthening internally. And as you continue listening, you may notice that life begins making sense in an entirely different way. not because every question receives an answer, but because your spirit starts recognizing what belongs and what does not. This awareness has already begun changing your relationship with the world around you. Things you once accepted without question no longer feel compatible with who you are becoming. Behaviors you once tolerated now create discomfort. Situations you once accommodated now feel restrictive. Certain environments no longer resonate. Certain connections no longer feel natural. This does not mean you have become distant. It does not mean you have become difficult. It means you have changed. Your consciousness has expanded. Your energy has evolved. And as that evolution continues, it becomes impossible to remain comfortable inside realities that were built for an older version of yourself. The discomfort you sometimes feel is not evidence that something is wrong. It is evidence that transformation is underway. Space is being created for experiences, relationships, and opportunities that align with the person you are becoming rather than the person you used to be. Even during moments when nothing appears to be happening, movements are taking place beyond your awareness. Paths are being prepared. Circumstances are rearranging themselves. Conversations are unfolding in places you cannot yet see. Opportunities are being positioned. Connections are being formed. The machinery of alignment continues operating whether you witness it or not. You are not behind schedule. You have not been forgotten. You are not trapped in place. You are inside a process unfolding with extraordinary precision, and when the results become visible, they will not feel random. They will not feel rushed. They will feel intentional, as though every piece arrived exactly where it was meant to be. Yet before the next chapter fully reveals itself, there is one final invitation. One last release. One attachment that continues lingering at the edge of your journey. Perhaps it is a belief you have carried for years. Perhaps it is a connection that no longer reflects your growth. Perhaps it is an identity you have already outgrown. Or perhaps it is an expectation about how your future should unfold. Whatever form it takes, you have felt its presence. You have sensed it slipping away, even while part of you continued holding on. Letting go may feel uncomfortable because familiarity often creates the illusion of security. Yet what is being asked of you now is not sacrifice for the sake of loss. It is release for the sake of expansion, because the thing you are holding onto occupies space that something greater is already trying to fill. And this final act of trust is not about giving something up. It is about making room for what has been moving toward you all along. What is unfolding around you now reaches far beyond a simple improvement in circumstances. It is something much deeper, much more profound. Imagine standing at the edge of a landscape you have known your entire life, only to realize that the horizon itself is changing. The rules that once governed your experiences are beginning to lose their authority. The perspectives that shaped your decisions for years are being replaced by a broader awareness. The energy through which you interpret reality is evolving, and because of that evolution, reality itself begins to appear different. You are not merely entering a better chapter, you are entering a different way of existing. Gradually, you will notice that your reactions are changing. Situations that once triggered fear may now inspire reflection. Challenges that once overwhelmed you may now reveal hidden opportunities. Decisions that once felt impossible will begin to feel surprisingly clear. This transformation will not happen all at once. It will reveal itself, layer by layer, experience by experience, realization by realization. And as it unfolds, you will begin recognizing that the person stepping into this new phase is no longer the same person who started the journey. This is not the conclusion you once imagined reaching. It is the opening of an entirely new beginning, one that mirrors the deeper truth of who you have become through every lesson, every setback, and every breakthrough that brought you here. One of the most important things to understand now is that what is approaching may look very different from the images your mind created during the waiting period. Human nature often tries to predict the future in order to feel safe. You may have pictured a specific opportunity arriving through a particular path. You may have imagined a certain individual playing a certain role. You may have expected events to unfold according to a carefully constructed vision. Yet life rarely moves according to the scripts we write for it. The blessing preparing to enter your experience carries its own direction, its own wisdom, and its own timing. It does not need permission from your expectations in order to arrive. In fact, many of the greatest moments of transformation appear only after control has loosened its grip. They emerge when you stop attempting to manage every variable and begin allowing a greater intelligence to operate through your life. And when that moment arrives, there will be an unmistakable pause within you. Time may seem to slow. The noise of uncertainty may suddenly disappear. Something deeper than thought will awaken and recognize what is happening, not because it matches a fantasy you created, but because it resonates with a truth that has existed within you all along. In that instant, recognition will replace confusion. You will not need endless analysis. You will not need external opinions. You will not need constant reassurance from others. Instead, a calm certainty will settle into your spirit. It will feel grounded rather than dramatic, stable rather than chaotic, clear rather than complicated. This is the nature of genuine alignment. It does not arrive wrapped in panic or uncertainty. It arrives with a quiet confidence that speaks directly to the deepest part of your being. The mind may still have questions, but your spirit will already know. The recognition will emerge from a place beyond logic, beyond evidence, beyond explanation. It will come from the part of you that has always understood your path, even during moments when your conscious awareness struggled to make sense of it. And when that understanding finally settles into place, something remarkable will happen. Experiences that once felt disconnected will begin forming a larger picture. Delays that once appeared frustrating will reveal hidden purpose. Challenges that once seemed unfair will begin sharing the role they played in your development. For the first time, the story of your journey will start making sense as a whole rather than as separate pieces scattered across time. What is taking place now is not temporary. It is not a passing emotional high or a brief moment of inspiration that fades as quickly as it arrived. It is a foundational shift. The direction of your life is changing in a way that cannot be undone. Once this level of awareness becomes integrated into who you are, there is no genuine return to the limitations that once defined your experience. Old patterns may attempt to reappear, but they will no longer feel natural. Old fears may occasionally surface, but they will no longer control your decisions in the same way. The former version of your reality is losing its hold because you are no longer the same person who created it. At first, the magnitude of this realization may feel overwhelming, yet that intensity exists because transformation is not something happening around you. It is something happening within you. You are becoming the embodiment of the change itself. And once transformation becomes embodied, it ceases to be an event and becomes a foundation upon which everything else is built. As this process continues, you may discover that some people around you struggle to understand what is happening. They may question choices that feel obvious to you. They may misunderstand changes that seem necessary from your perspective. They may attempt to interpret your evolution through the lens of their own experiences and limitations. Yet this does not mean you are moving in the wrong direction. It simply reflects the reality that not every journey can be fully understood by those who are not living it. Some paths are deeply personal. Some transformations are visible only from within. The growth occurring inside you was never intended to be validated by everyone around you. In fact, learning to continue forward without constant approval is part of the transformation itself. There comes a point where confidence must originate internally rather than externally. There comes a point where trusting your own alignment becomes more important than convincing others to understand it. And that point is becoming increasingly important in your life now. More than external circumstances, more than outcomes, more than recognition, the greatest guide available to you is your own energy. The state of your inner world influences everything else. The way you think, the way you respond, the way you align yourself emotionally and spiritually creates a ripple effect throughout your reality. You are beginning to understand this at a much deeper level. You are beginning to realize that your true power never existed outside of you. It was never hidden in another person, another opportunity, another achievement, or another destination. It has always existed within your own consciousness. This realization changes everything because it redirects your focus. Instead of endlessly chasing results, you begin nurturing alignment. Instead of searching for validation, you begin trusting your own knowing. Instead of forcing outcomes, you begin cultivating the energy that naturally attracts them. And as you continue operating from this place, you will notice something fascinating. Things begin moving toward you with less effort. Opportunities appear. Connections form. Circumstances shift, not because you are chasing them harder, but because you are no longer operating from scarcity or resistance. The season that felt like endless waiting is reaching its conclusion. The delays that tested your patience, the pauses that seemed impossible to understand, the timing that often felt frustrating, are beginning to reveal their purpose. Looking back, you will start seeing that nothing was truly misplaced. Nothing arrived late. Nothing intended for you was permanently withheld. The larger picture was unfolding according to a schedule invisible to your immediate perspective. And as that realization settles into your awareness, a profound sense of relief begins emerging. The tension you carried for so long starts dissolving. The need to force outcomes weakens. The fear that something has gone wrong begins fading away. In its place comes a deeper trust that everything is arriving exactly when it should. Yet what approaches is larger than a single breakthrough, larger than one blessing, larger than one moment of success. It is positioning you for continued growth, continued expansion, and continued evolution. This next chapter is not a final destination. It is the beginning of a much greater unfolding. There are experiences ahead that will challenge you to grow even further. Opportunities that will require new levels of courage, expansions that will invite you into greater expressions of your potential. You do not need to see the entire picture right now. You only need to trust that where you stand today is exactly where you need to be for what is coming next. Every sign you have noticed, every internal shift, every moment of resonance, every sensation that something important is changing serves as confirmation that you are moving in the right direction. Even the uncertainty has purpose. Even the discomfort carries guidance. Even the questions are helping direct you toward greater clarity. Nothing is working against you. The forces shaping your journey are supporting your growth, encouraging your evolution, and guiding you toward a reality that reflects who you have become. The more deeply you trust that process, the more powerfully your external world begins responding to that trust, creating a life that mirrors the alignment now awakening within you.